Welcome to the History of Metals Part 3. Here is where we will do a little recap. So what you should have learnt by now is some of the uses of different metals through history, including contemporary uses as uncombined metals or as alloys. You should also be able to describe the use of common alloys, including steel and brass, and explain how these relate to their properties. So you should have some idea by now as to why we started off, or man started off, in the Copper Age, then moved on to the Bronze Age, and then to the Iron Age in terms of metals and how easy or difficult they are to extract from their ore, and the technologies that have been used to get metals to this state. I now have something for you to do. So one of your dot points in the History of Metals syllabus is that you need to analyse information to relate the chronology of the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and the modern era, and possible future developments. So what I would like you to do now is construct a timeline using the following dates to show when metals were used in history. So the dates have been written down for you. So you need to draw a timeline, and you need to make sure that being a timeline, this timeline is to scale. All right, so you need to work out what happened around 9500 BC all the way to the more recent 100 BC in terms of the history of metals. You can use the information that I have given you in the History of Metals Part 1 and Part 2, as well as your chemistry textbooks. So please pause this video now and complete yourselves a timeline. More work for you. So just to revise some of the information that I have delivered, please refer to your metals booklet and turn to the pages on metallurgy and the age of metals and answer the revision questions 1 to 4. So please stop this video now and answer these questions. We have already looked at some of the historical and contemporary uses of metals. One of your dot points, you need to outline and examine some uses of different metals through history, including contemporary uses as uncombined metals or alloys, as we've discussed in the past couple of videos. So please now complete the table in your metals booklet on historical and contemporary uses of metals. Again, please stop this video now. Alloys. As you should all know by now, alloys are combinations of a metal with another element. So you need to be able to describe the use of common alloys including steel, brass and solder, and explain how these relate to their properties. You also need to gather, process, analyse and present information from secondary sources on the range of alloys produced and the reasons for the production and use of these alloys. This is all covered in the questions, including a table in your metals booklet on alloys. Again, please stop this video and have a go at answering these questions and completing the table now. Another important thing to understand when learning about metals is energy input and how we extract metals. So we need to be able to explain why energy input is necessary to extract a metal from its ore. Now, if metals occur in the native state, in other words, as the element, the only energy required is that of physical separation. But the majority of metals occur as ores, with the metal bound in the mineral by ionic bonds. The metal must be removed from the ore by physical and/or chemical means, and this requires energy. Energy is required to remove the impurities in the ore. However, the most energy is required in breaking the ionic bonds. The more reactive a metal is, the more likely it is to react with other elements like oxygen, sulfur, etc. The more reactive a metal, the more energy is required to separate it from its mineral compound. So in extracting metals, some metals only require heat for their extraction, and an example of this would be copper. Some metals require electrolytic methods for their extraction, for example, active metals, including potassium, magnesium, and calcium. Some metals require chemical energy for their extraction. For example, extraction of titanium from titanium chloride is done by reacting with magnesium or sodium. Now, the more reactive a metal, the more energy is required to separate it from its mineral compound. So what about the availability of metals? We need to be able to identify why there are more metals available for people to use now than there were 200 years ago. So the number of metals available for us has increased during the last 200 years. This is because of the development of chemistry and new extraction techniques. So in other words, a massive improvement in technology. So for example, aluminium is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, but was not used extensively until the beginning of the 20th century because aluminium is so difficult and expensive to extract from its ore, bauxite. But in 1886, technology was developed to extract aluminium at a low cost, and the use of aluminium increased rapidly. Now I would like you to have a go at some exam-style questions. So please work through questions 1 to 4. So I need you to have a look at the questions, pause the video, and you will find some answers on the following slides. All right, so let's go through the questions. Why does smelting require high temperatures? Was it to burn the metal, to break the chemical bonds, to shine the metal, or to melt the metal? The answer should be B. Chemical bonds need to be broken to release the metal from the ore. How about question 2? Suggest reasons why iron is the most extensively used metal and rarely used in pure form. Firstly, focus on the main word in this question. It is saying suggest. So what you should be doing is coming up with an advantage of iron for why it's the most extensively used metal and a disadvantage of iron to explain why it's rarely used in a pure form. So, iron is the most extensively used metal because iron is a major constituent of steel, and steel is a widely used building material. In addition, iron is the second most abundant metal in the Earth's crust. Iron is rarely used in pure form. In other words, the disadvantages of iron are that iron is easily corroded in combination with air and moisture to form rust. Question 3. Explain why copper, gold, and silver were used long before any other metals. Here, you should be focusing on the fact that the question is asking you to explain something. So, an answer could be that copper, silver, and gold were often found in their elemental form. In other words, they were not chemically combined with other substances, and so could be used in the form in which they are found. And finally, question 4. Again, here you have been asked to explain. Explain why energy is needed to extract metals from their ores. So an example answer would be something like this. Energy is needed to physically break up the ore and separate the mineral from the gangue. Energy is needed to bring about the chemical decomposition of the mineral so as to extract the metal. The decomposition of a compound needs the input of energy to break the bonds holding the compound together. This is now the end of our section, The History of Metals. Thank you for listening and watching.